acabo ya de poner la grabación. Decía entonces que a nombre de la universidad les damos la más cordial bienvenida a todos y comentarles que el doctor Juan Morales, coordinador del programa de ética, no podrá intervenir hoy debido a un contratiempo de salud, pero él quiere transmitir su complacencia con la realización de este evento. Un saludo muy especial a nuestro conferencista, Dr. George Enderle, presidente de la Sociedad Internacional de Negocios, Economía y Ética. A special greeting for you, George. You're very welcome. We appreciate your presence here. También un saludo especial a la moderadora del evento, doctora Cecilia Arruda, directora ejecutiva de ALENE, Asociación Latinoamericana de Ética en los Negocios. Y un saludo especial a nuestros comentaristas, quienes también son miembros de ALENE, Jorge Mendoza, quien nos acompaña desde Chile, y María Marta Preciosa desde Argentina. Bienvenidos. Creemos que el tema que nos congrega hoy, la responsabilidad corporativa para la creación de riqueza, es de enorme importancia, un tema de interés para las empresas, la academia y la sociedad en general, pues actualmente todos deberíamos tener presente y tener muy claro que el propósito de lograr una sociedad más justa y solidaria requiere no solo de los esfuerzos de los gobiernos, sino también de todos los actores involucrados. Nuevamente agradezco la presencia de todos, la más cordial bienvenida a todos los visitantes desde el exterior y cedo ahora la palabra a la doctora Cecilia Arruda para que modere el evento. Adelante, Cecilia.
Muchas gracias, Jimeno. Muchísimas gracias a la universidad que nos propuso hacer el panel a través de ellos, ¿no? De todos, profesores y estudiantes y el equipo todo. Le agradezco muchísimo a Melita, que va a tener un rol muy importante en este panel, ¿no? Y María Marta y Jorge, que se dispusieron a venir para participar. George, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Será muy bueno tener George Enderle con nosotros. Y un muy especial agradecimiento al profesor Juan Morales, que desafortunadamente no pudo estar con nosotros esta mañana o esta tarde, depende de dónde estamos. Entonces, llega a él nuestro saludo, ¿no? Bueno, les cuento que el tema ya Jimena nos propuso, ¿no? Ya nos contó. Entonces, pensamos en esta dinámica. Damos a George Enderle como 15 a 20 minutos para su presentación. Mientras tanto, los participantes... bienvenidos todos los participantes, Dios mío, lo más importante de todo, ¿no? Bueno, entonces, en los 15 y 20 minutos, George habla, hace su presentación. Después tenemos como 10, 15 minutos para María Marta y Jorge Mendoza hacerle preguntas o como si fuera un diálogo y George Enderle le contesta. Y ahí abrimos para que todos puedan participar. Entonces, para eso, por favor, envíen un chat y ya voy poniendo en el orden para que puedan participar. ¿Okay? Vamos a darle un tiempito a Melita para que pueda traducir a George, por favor. Muchas gracias a todos.
Well, thank you very much, Cecilia, and thank you, Dr. Jimena Moscoso, for your welcome. I'm so happy and honored to join you, your university, who is taking a leadership role in ethics programs. I'm so glad that I can see many old and new friends in ALENE. You know, many years ago, Cecilia and Maria Marta and others were very pioneering business ethics in Latin and South America. And so I was involved at that time, and since then we remained good friends. So I'm so pleased to do. I'm also happy that I have Melita as my support to translate what I'm trying to say in English. We had a nice and productive meeting yesterday, so to find out how to use our 20 minutes in a productive way, and hopefully it will work well. What I'm going to do is a short presentation of my new book, Corporate Responsibility for Wealth Creation and Human Rights. And I prepared a PowerPoint, and I will show you the first slide.
Bueno, buenas tardes, gracias a todos. Me complace mucho de estar aquí y ver a muchas caras, amigos de la red de ALENE. Mi presentación consistirá en una presentación de mi libro y me permito presentarles este PowerPoint.
I have to be older. So, this is the title or the image of my book, Corporate Responsibility for Wealth Creation. And it has 3 parts. The first part is about wealth creation. What does it mean as the purpose of business and the economy? The second part is about human rights as public goods in wealth creation. And the third part is about implications of wealth creation and human rights for corporate responsibility. This is a clear structure, 3 parts, and Cambridge University Press asked me to give some suggestions for the cover image of the book. And I was searching long and finally found this painting by Paul Klee, Full Moon at Fire, which I think summarizes those 3 points. You see the yellow moon, which represents wealth creation. You see the fire representing human rights, and you see many cubes and squares, dark blue, dark green, dark yellow, representing the companies which should orient and be guided by the moon and by the fire.
Esta es la carátula del libro y la casa editorial en Cambridge me pusieron la tarea de escoger la carátula, como ustedes pueden ver aquí, es arte de Paul Klee, y aquí pueden apreciar 3 figuras que representan las ideas principales en el libro, la luna amarilla como la creación de la riqueza, el fuego rojo como derechos humanos y la parte azul, café, negro y otros cuadritos y cubos como la vasta cantidad de compañías quienes pueden ser guiados bajo la luz de la luna y el fuego.
So, wealth creation is the purpose of business and the economy. And what I'm trying to do here is to propose a radically new view on wealth creation, which is necessary today in a global world, in a global and pluralistic society. The book has first 2 chapters, the introduction and overview of the book with chapter 1, and then to place this discussion into the context of globalization, sustainability, and financialization. These are 3 key terms which I think influence whatever we do, and globalization is a context we cannot negate, but it affects us. We know that from the COVID crisis again. Sustainability, the way to go, and financialization, what is the role of money in that context.
Estos 3 temas de globalización, sostenibilidad y financialización son 3 temas muy importantes que no podemos dejar de lado.
So the first part, the purpose of business and the economy. In the chapter 3, I explain quickly what does wealth mean, semantics. And then wealth includes not only economic capital, but also natural capital, environment, human capital, which means healthy and educated people, and social capital means trust relations.
En los siguientes capítulos explico lo que es la riqueza, que incluye capital natural, económico, humano y social.
And a new thing which I think has far-reaching consequences is to understand the wealth as a combination of both private and public wealth. Not only as an aggregation of private wealth, but it's a combination of private and public wealth. Number 6 is the process. It's not only about producing growth, but at the same time we have to look at the distributive dimensions. Number 7, it includes material and spiritual aspects. It's not a purely materialistic process. Number 8, it's about sustainability in terms of human capabilities of Amartya Sen. Number 9, it is creating, which means making something new and better. And finally, number 10, wealth creation needs self-regarding and other-regarding motivations, both. So, fortunately, Cecilia and Melita had put the Spanish subtitle so we can follow this a little bit more easily. Now, here I remind of two important books. Adam Smith, of course, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, and the book by David Lance, who was professor of economic history at Harvard, Wealth and Poverty of Nations. So the question I start with is, what makes a country rich? What is the wealth of a country? And I think that's a very important question 250 years ago and under Adam Smith, but still today, even in the corona pandemic. And
quisiera comenzar con la pregunta de qué es la riqueza de un país, qué exactamente hace que un país sea rico.
Now, I think the question of the economic system has to be placed in a broader context of society. That means the purpose of the economic system is the creation of wealth, but there is a political system which is about power, and the socio-cultural system, it's about knowledge, and everything is embedded into nature. We cannot evade nature. So those is a graphic taken from Talcott Parson, the famous sociologist.
Estas preguntas acerca de qué es la riqueza de un país tiene que situarse en un contexto de una sociedad con tres sistemas que parcialmente se sobreponen. Los sistemas económico, político y sociocultural que están incrustados en la naturaleza. Por lo tanto, la creación de la riqueza debe considerarse dentro de estas limitaciones.
Now, the question, what is wealth? The wealth of a country. And I said, to combine it, it's a combination of private wealth and public wealth, not only an accumulation of private wealth. And this is my definition. It's a total amount of economically relevant private and public assets, including natural capital, economic capital, human capital, and social capital. Now, there are, in the last 15 years, a number of interesting publications by the World Bank. There is the Wealth of Nations, how to measure capital for the 21st century. And I just refer to this, but I could learn a lot how the World Bank is defining the wealth of nations.
Me refiero a este libro proporcionado por el Banco Mundial, de dónde está la riqueza de las naciones, midiendo capital para el siglo XXI. Me hago referencia a este libro.
So here is a statistic of, you see the poorest countries, Ethiopia, then India, China, USA, Norway, the richest country. And what is interesting here, and that's why I show this slide, is there are natural capital, produced capital, net foreign assets, and intangible capital, different types of capital.
Con este listado quiero presentarles los diferentes tipos de capital que generan estos países, desde los más pobres, desde el más pobre hasta el más rico.
You see, for instance, Ethiopia has only $1,123 in natural capital, but Norway has 100 times more.
La diferencia entre Etiopía, que tiene una capital natural de $1,123, comparado con Noruega, con 110,000.
So this is an approach how to measure different types of capital.
Este es un solo enfoque para poder medir los diferentes tipos de capital.
Now, I would like to say a few words about public goods and private public bads, how to define them. And in economics, public goods and public bads are formally defined by the characteristics of two things: non-rivalry and non-excludability. I use always the example of sunshine. So I can enjoy sunshine while my neighbor can enjoy it without taking the sunshine away from me. That's non-rivalry and nobody can be excluded. This is the technical definition of public goods in economics, and it plays a very important role for the understanding of wealth.
Esta es la definición muy importante y juega un papel muy importante en la definición de lo que es la riqueza.
So, for instance, examples of public goods: a fair and effective rule of law, or a relatively corruption-free business environment, or the stability of the financial system. That was particularly important in the financial crisis in 2008-2009, when the financial crisis was at an abyss, almost destroyed completely. The stability, that public good was in danger enormously.
Esos ejemplos de bienes públicos, lo que es un Estado de derecho justo y eficaz, un entorno empresarial relativamente libre de corrupción y sobre todo la estabilidad del sistema financiero, esa importancia se cobró más fuerza en la crisis financiera del 2008 y 2009 con la caída de los bancos.
And some examples of public beds: climate change, of course, global warming, air and water pollution, discrimination by gender, race, ethnicity, conflict-stricken areas. So these are only a few examples, but they are important to understand what wealth creation is in a comprehensive sense. Now, second point I want to emphasize, that private and public goods are mutually dependent. To produce, the production of private goods depends on public goods and can suffer from public bads. Individuals and companies need public goods in order to be productive. So the production of private goods is dependent. That is something which we have to tell many people who think that only the market creates wealth.
Muchas personas quienes piensan que solamente el mercado es quien crea o es que crea la riqueza, es importante recalcarles que la producción de los bienes privados depende de los bienes públicos.
On the other side, the production of public goods also depends on the contributions by individuals and companies through taxes, philanthropy, expertise in science and technology, arts, the humanities, and many other fields. So there is a mutual dependence of private and public goods. And the next point is the strength and limitations of the market institution. Based on individual preferences and the price system coordinating supply and demand, the market has proven a powerful means for producing private goods in an efficient manner. But the market institution fails to produce public goods because their consumption is non-rival and no price can be assigned to public goods. How to put the price on climate change, how to do on the stability of a financial system, etc.
Por ejemplo, cómo poner un precio en el cambio climático y cómo poner un precio en la crisis financiera.
So this is therefore major collective factors such as states and governments and different levels are necessary to produce public goods. That cannot be provided by the market institution. And finally, we need different types of motivations to produce private goods. The motivation of self-interest plays an important, though not an exclusive role, but the production of public goods is based on human relatedness and needs other regarding motivations such as gratitude for the gifts received, entrepreneurial spirit and service to others. So the commitment to public goods does not earn immediate rewards, may offer uncertain personal benefits in the future and can even demand personal sacrifices. Motivations, self-regarding and other-regarding motivations are crucial to produce wealth creation in a comprehensive sense.
Las motivaciones son muy cruciales en la producción de la riqueza.
So here is an overview and what I explained in the book much more. but you can see in the middle column is about how to understand wealth. On the left side, what does it mean create, to make something new and better, not just to possess and acquire. And on the right side, it's about self and other regarding motivations. You can find much more information in my book, but I wanted to show you this overview just to get an idea about it.
Quería presentarles esta tabla que pueden ver más en detalle en mi libro.
Now we come to the second part of the book, and I make it very short, namely human rights as public goods in wealth creation.
Llego a la segunda parte del libro.
So next chapter is all human rights are at stake. What are all human rights? These are the 30 human rights which are in the International Bill of Human Rights, which include the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, and the Economic Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. 30 human rights. And this is the basis of the UN guiding principles for business and human rights.
Estos son los principios de las Naciones Unidas en cuanto a derechos.
Then human rights are only minimal ethical requirements. It's not covering the whole area of ethics, of course not. Then we have to look at cost benefits, but not in a technical sense, but in a more broader sense, as Amartya Sen does. And human rights are public goods. These are 4 points which I developed more in the book, but I cannot say more right now.
Estos 4 puntos los detallo mucho más en el libro.
Now, here you see the guiding principles on business and human rights from the UN United Nations, and there are now countries like Switzerland or Germany or the European Union and others who are trying to make those guidelines legally binding. And this is, for instance, just this morning I read the news that question in Germany is, what about German companies doing business in Xinjiang province in China? There is a violent violation of human rights. So,
justamente estaba leyendo en esta mañana entre esos países que están intentando que sean estos principios legalmente vinculantes, y justamente leía que la pregunta acerca de las empresas alemanas quienes están queriendo hacer negocios en la China, donde existen bastantes altas violaciones de derechos humanos.
So that is the second part. And now to the third part, what does that mean for corporate responsibility? What are the implications?
Entonces, ¿qué quiere decir todo esto para la responsabilidad corporativa en esta tercera parte?
And here is the chapter 15 is about why corporate responsibility, not CSR, not corporate social responsibility. I think that is taken by John Ruggie, the UN Guiding Principles, but it's a key term which has become the leading term, the most important term. Then it's about the moral status of business organizations. What does it mean? A company bears moral responsibility, how to map corporate responsibilities in terms of wealth creation and human rights. Then also what is corporate governance, what is the role of corporate governance to create wealth and respect human rights. And 2 chapters which are examples which I added to the book, Corporate Responsibility for Less Income Inequality, and a case in point from our university. This is about what I'm trying to develop, the framework for corporate responsibility, the implications.
Todo eso se trata, es parte de mi trabajo para crear un marco para la responsabilidad corporativa.
Now, in business ethics, everybody knows in business we distinguish those 3 levels: the micro level, the meso level, and the macro level. And the micro level means the decision making of individual persons, meso level of organizations, and the macro level of systems. And so what we
Todos conocemos estos de las éticas de negocios que tienen tres niveles. A nivel micro se trata de las decisiones tomadas por los individuos, a nivel meso decisiones tomadas por las empresas y a nivel macro las decisiones tomadas por los sistemas.
And on the right side there are different types of international relations I cannot discuss now. Now, what is a corporation? And we have, of course, many different answers to this. In neoclassical economics, it's a production function or a nexus of contracts, property, economic mechanism, etc., community organizations. I take the definition of James Coleman, the famous sociologist, who defines the corporate actor, which has, like a personal actor, essential properties of actors: to control, the control over resources and events, the interest in resources and events, and the capability of taking actions to realize those interests through that control. This is an important point, and because many people say it's nonsense to say that the company is morally responsible.
Esta última definición por el sociólogo James Coleman es importante porque hay muchas personas que piensan que no tiene sentido considerarle a una empresa como una persona, como algo social.
So, it is different from a personal actor as a system of action composed of different positions held by different persons. Okay, it's a freestanding organization. Now, I go quickly at what does it mean as a moral actor and responsibility. I think I'm running out of time. I would like to show this slide here that we use in business ethics all the time. If the actor has a certain space of freedom, moral responsibility is equivalent to that space of freedom.
En interés del tiempo, quisiera mostrarles este gráfico donde se muestra que si es que el actor tiene un espacio de libertad de acción, también existe la responsabilidad moral dentro de ese espacio.
And here, to create, now what does it mean to corporate responsibility to contribute to the creation of public goods? Is about, for instance, here I have an example of infrastructure in the United States. We discuss that now between Democrats and Republicans. What is infrastructure? And basically, the question, is that a public good or not? And if it's a public good, the state and the government has to play an important role.
Una discusión importante entre demócratas y republicanos en los Estados Unidos es las inversiones en infraestructura.
And now I have 4 examples. The first here is, of course, the Volkswagen scandal, which broke in September 2015, which destroyed a lot of natural capital.
Primero de los 4 ejemplos que tengo es de Volkswagen, un escándalo que se desató en el 2015.
The second example for economic destruction of economic capital is Wells Fargo Bank, which expanded its customer base by cheating their account holders.
El segundo ejemplo es del caso famoso de Wells Fargo, quienes expandieron sus números de cuentas bancarias, pero a través de trampas.
The third example is a good example. Here, Medtronic in the medical device industry, how they focus on the health of the customers and employees over many decades of years, since the 1950s.
El tercer ejemplo es de la empresa Medtronic, que pertenece a la industria de dispositivos médicos y cómo aumentaron su crecimiento con respecto a sus negocios, a sus empleados.
And here is the fourth example for social capital, the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh, Mohamed Yunus, who created that trust relationship to the poor people in the countryside, and particularly to women, so they could become productive and create wealth in the sense I tried to explain.
El cuarto ejemplo es el banco Grameen en Bangladesh, quienes intentaron establecer confianza, relación de confianza sobre todo con mujeres emprendedoras para poder contribuir a la creación de riqueza.
So this is a very quick explanation of my framework. I'm very glad and honored that now Jorge and Maria Marta are going to comment. It is a framework which raises many questions, but I hope we have a good discussion. Thank you very much for your attention.
Muchas gracias por su atención y a través de eso lo que he intentado es
Gracias.
presentarles un marco de mi trabajo y espero que María Marta y Jorge puedan agregar o presentar más preguntas.
Perfecto. María Marta, Jorge, escogen. ¿Qué prefiere empezar?
Sí.
Muchas gracias.
Lady first, María Marta.
Bueno, si les parece, yo puedo presentar en un PowerPoint 3 preguntas. I have 3 questions for George. And you can choose which one
Okay.
to address. So, they are in English. I can say them in Spanish for the most of people. Bueno, la creación de riqueza es un concepto para mí muy inspirador de tu libro, sobre todo por el enfoque interdisciplinar and the focus on the meso level, el foco en las organizaciones y su estatus moral, and its moral status and responsibility. La definición de riqueza siempre puede ser una idea muy divisoria, ¿no? Sobre todo entre los políticos y los partidos, y también entre los pensadores cristianos y empresarios cristianos. ¿De qué modo tu libro resuelve o supera esta discusión? This is the first question. The second one es que George establece una clara diferencia entre poseer y adquirir riqueza, y lo opone a crear riqueza. Entonces, crear riqueza es menos egoísta, es más arduo, es más trabajoso, o es simplemente diferente. ¿Y de qué modo es diferente? Y la tercera pregunta es, al menos entre los MBA students, la teoría de creación de valor compartido de Michael Porter suele ser entusiasta, digamos, genera entusiasmo, pero bueno, si bien ha sido muy criticada también, ¿en qué medida es diferente el aporte de George Henry? Well, these are my 3 questions and comments, so maybe George, you can choose your ideas. You can share your ideas. Thank you.
Would you like me to answer now or wait until Jorge presented his questions or his comments?
Okay. First English and after in Spanish. It is uncommon to study human rights from economy, as normally it is taught from human right to economy, is other direction. Likewise, it is interesting to appreciate the nuance necessary for economy to respect and promote human rights, especially the so-called social right, which imply financial resources to guarantee their compliance. Nevertheless, I have 2 concerns. First, is it appropriate to state as purpose of economy the creation of wealth rather than the meet of need, particularly when there are some wealthy nations which have a significant part of their population living in multidimensional poverty? And my second concept refers to freedom as a supreme value and achievement rather than as a condition for self-realization in decision making. En español ahora, resulta novedoso el enfoque de mirar los derechos humanos desde la economía, ya que normalmente se hace desde los derechos humanos hacia la economía. También es interesante apreciar la cantidad de matices necesarios para el ejercicio de la economía, que no solo respete y promueve los derechos humanos, especialmente aquellos denominados como derechos sociales, que significan una asignación de recursos monetarios para su cumplimiento. Sin embargo, me caben 2 inquietudes. La primera es si es adecuado asignar como propósito de la economía la creación de riqueza en vez de la satisfacción de necesidades, especialmente cuando hay países con una gran riqueza económica, pero también con una significativa parte de su población en situación de pobreza multidimensional. La segunda inquietud se refiere a la libertad como valor supremo y logro más que como condición para la realización personal en la toma de decisiones. Quiero aclarar, yo soy profesor de Historia y Geografía Social y dedicado a la ética, no soy economista propiamente tal. Gracias.
Very good. Well, thank you both. If I have some, I think I understand the questions, but I have to speak in English, I'm sorry. And if I misunderstood your questions, particularly Jorge, you correct me. Yes. Well, first to the points Maria Marta mentioned. I think, as I said, I consider my approach a very radical approach, not in the sense that it is say revolutionary, but it goes to the roots of the questions. And the context is a global context and a pluralistic context. Both global and pluralistic is important. And that means we need understanding in terms of what the economy is, the purpose of economy, but we need clear ethical minimal requirements.
Ahora, la visión de mi libro es bastante radical, no revolucionaria, sino radical, y tenemos dos contextos, el contexto global y un contexto pluralista, y necesitamos entender el propósito de una economía.
And that's why when Maria Marta asked me about the difference from Michael Porter and my approach, the answer is very easy, you know. Michael Porter, with his shared value, he shares only value when a company benefits also.
En cuanto a la distinción de la definición de Michael Porter, cuando él habla de valor compartido, él habla del valor cuando le conviene a una empresa.
A company, I had discussions with Nestle, you know, with a member of the board of directors of Nestle, and Nestle embraced Michael Porter's shared value philosophy.
Por ejemplo, yo conversé con los directores de Nestle y ellos comparten la teoría de Porter acerca de valor compartido.
And I told her that Michael Porter's shared value is not willing to contribute to the creation of public goods if they have to make some sacrifices.
Yo le comenté a un miembro de la directiva que Nestle, bajo este valor, no están dispuestos a crear riqueza para la construcción de bienes públicos.
So when I say the purpose of the wealth of Switzerland is a combination of public and private goods, means that companies also have to contribute to the creation of public goods, not only in Switzerland, but also in Chile and in each country.
Yo hablo de lo que hacen los países como Suiza, por ejemplo. El propósito de las empresas es crear riqueza y también bienes privados y públicos.
So that is, and a friend of mine published a whole book on a critique of Michael Porter. I cannot say more right now, but I mean, my approach is very different because he does not understand what public goods are.
Mi enfoque es bastante diferente porque Porter no entiende el significado de lo que son bienes públicos.
If he understood what public goods are, then he would say, well, you know, the market cannot produce them. You know that from economics. And we need other regarding motivation. Self-interest is not working.
Si es que lo entendiera, como no entiende lo que son, pero si es que lo entendiera, no sabría cómo producirlos.
So the second question about how to provide a common ground for politicians and also Christians and others, you know. I think that is a very important thing. I talk about this in chapter 7 about the spiritual approach or the understanding, spiritual side, understanding of wealth creation. And I think for Christians, I mean, we now, at least Catholic social teaching is very clear that human rights are essential, you know, since the Second Vatican Council with John Paul, not John Paul, but John 23rd. And so that means for Christians to support and to enforce human rights, also not only for the governments, but also for companies, and of course also in the churches themselves, you know. is an easy thing. I mean,
Pienso que
it's
es,
impractical.
pienso que es algo práctico lograr un punto común entre políticos y cristianos, sobre todo dentro de la doctrina religiosa, está que los derechos humanos son esenciales.
And the first question about interdisciplinarity. Now, as you can see, I'm extremely influenced by Amartya Sen. You know, Amartya Sen, I first studied his booklet on economic inequality in the 1970s when I prepared my PhD in economics.
Yo he sido mucho las enseñanzas de Amartya Sen y yo lo estudié como referencia cuando estaba cumpliendo mis estudios de doctorado.
And I was happy to spend half a year with Amartya Sen at Harvard. And so my book is full of influence of Amartya Sen.
Por lo tanto, mi libro tiene mucha influencia.
And interdisciplinary means that economics, you know what I learned also from Amartya Sen, that economics is not just a bad discipline. It can be a good thing, you know.
Lo que aprendí también es que la economía no es una disciplina mala, puede ser algo muy bueno.
But he distinguishes those two approaches to economics, the ethics-related approach and the engineering approach.
Pero él distingue dos enfoques, desde la ética y desde la ingeniería.
And engineering approach means that economists just get the goals from politicians or from themselves and then figure out what are the most effective means to achieve any goal.
Los ingenieros toman sus pautas de los economistas y de los políticos y luego determinan a través de cómo se pueden conseguir esas metas.
And so Amartya Sen says ethics-related approach to economics includes two things. Motivations are essential. You know, they are not just preferences. Anybody can have any kind of preference, but motivations are essential, and the achievement of social goals.
Cuanto al punto de vista de la ética, se tiene dos cosas, de que las motivaciones son esenciales.
And so motivations for me, they are not only self-regarding, but other-regarding motivations, and social goals are creating wealth.
Yo, desde mi punto de vista, que las metas sociales están creando y contribuyendo a la creación de riqueza.
Now to the questions of Jorge. The first, if I understood it, is the purpose of the economy. How is that related to poverty and the fight against poverty?
So what he said was, is it correct to use as a purpose of an economy wealth creation as opposed to social rights, considering the different conditions of countries?
So, you know, the human rights, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948 was a milestone in the history of humankind.
La Declaración de los Derechos Humanos en el 48 fue un hito en la historia de la humanidad.
And I studied this now, many books, and over the last 2 years, even more intensively. And what is extremely important is that Eleanor Roosevelt was able to find that consensus and support that civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights are equally important or depend from each other.
Es muy importante, Eleanor Roosevelt logró un consenso entre los derechos políticos y sociales y económicos.
And economic right means that each person has the right to a decent livelihood. No poverty is acceptable.
En cuanto a lo que son derechos económicos, quiere decir que cada individuo tiene derecho
or social security.
A seguridad social y económica.
And as you probably know, that the United States was in 1948 very strong in pushing that, along with the Soviet Union and other countries, and Latin American countries were very influential in that discussion. And so Franklin Roosevelt says that material well-being is a human right, you know. And
sorry, continue.
yes, and my point is that poverty from a human rights perspective is not acceptable. Yes.
Desde mi punto de vista, la pobreza desde un punto de vista de derechos humanos es inaceptable.
Yeah. A second point, when I talk about the process of creating wealth, it's not just about growth or production, but the distribution from the beginning of the means of production up to the end. Distributive aspects are equally important.
Cuando yo hablo del proceso de generación de riqueza, también hablo de la distribución desde los inicios.
And I'm very sensitive to this point because I did my PhD in economics on income distribution and inequality.
Yo hice mi PhD justamente de distribución de riqueza y la desigualdad económica. Entonces,
and I have a paper in my book chapter that companies actually, have a moral responsibility to reduce income inequality in their own organizations.
Hay un capítulo dedicado a esto en mi libro acerca de cómo reducir la desigualdad económica desde un punto de vista moral.
So, freedom, I think, or poverty, of course, is a has multiple aspects, and Amartya Sen is the first who emphasizes that, and I learned that a lot.
La pobreza tiene muchas facetas y Amartya Sen fue uno de los primeros en
So I would like to ask Jorge if I could answer his questions or if I was not clear enough or not.
Jorge, te pregunta si respondió a tus preguntas.
I am agree. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, well, what I did not say, but that would be a discussion for many hours, is how the human capability approach of Amartya Sen is actually foundational for how to create wealth. And human capabilities are closely related to human rights. So I think this is a basis which Hindus and Buddhists and Christians and Jews and Muslims can accept and support. And so I think it is possible. It's not so complicated to find a common ethical and common economic ground if we look hard at those. If you use those human capability approach.
Pienso que las capacidades humanas están íntimamente relacionadas con los derechos humanos y es un concepto que creo que pueden entender los hindúes, los budistas, los cristianos y se puede llegar a aceptar y hasta apoyar el concepto para poder encontrar este terreno común.
Okay, I think we still have 10 minutes for questions.
¿Más preguntas?
Or, I mean, Maria, Marta, or Jorge have more questions, please feel free.
No, I have only, I like your graphic, your yellow and green graphic. Could you please elaborate on that graphic more? That graphic with two circles that you show recently in the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Could you please elaborate on that?
Okay, I will go that here. That's a long. I mean, if you want the PowerPoint presentation, I'm happy to give it to you.
This one. I was thinking about this one.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Here. Okay. Well, that has to do how to define the space of freedom. And in my introduction to business ethics at Notre Dame, to students of 17 and 18 years old, I have to explain this in a way which hopefully they understand.
Este gráfico les explico a los chicos de 17 y 18 años de tal manera que ojalá puedan entender de cómo definir el espacio de la libertad.
And so I ask them to read some passages of the book of Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist from Vienna who was in the extinction camp of Auschwitz.
Les pido que lean algunos párrafos del libro de Viktor Frankl de Viena, quien estuvo en Auschwitz.
And he said it was horrible. You know, he was a psychiatrist. He could survive, but he saw all the atrocities of those extinction and concentration camps.
Él vio todas las atrocidades de esos campos de concentración.
And he said, as long that even under those extreme circumstances, the human being can make the choice how to face the future.
Y dijo que aún en esas circunstancias los seres humanos pueden tomar una decisión acerca de cómo va a ser el futuro.
So to face the future, and for him was, or am I going to see my wife again?
En el caso de él, para poder enfrentar el futuro, la pregunta era, ¿volveré a ver a mi esposa?
And can I do some research?
¿Y si puedo hacer investigación?
And he said this attitude towards the future was essential for survival.
Él dijo que esta actitud acerca del futuro era esencial para la supervivencia.
So, but because life is, we should not ask what can we expect from life, but what is life expecting from us, we have to answer.
Tenemos que contestar la pregunta más bien de qué es lo que la vida espera de nosotros.
And so moral responsibility is the answer to life, who ask us what should we do in our lives.
Entonces la responsabilidad moral es la respuesta a la pregunta de qué es lo que debemos hacer con nuestras vidas.
Okay, this is just an introduction, but the graphic here, those two circles mean that some people have large spaces of freedom and other people small spaces.
Este gráfico simplemente demuestra que algunas personas tienen grandes espacios de libertad, mientras que otros tienen más pequeños.
So if the space is large, but the moral responsibility I take is small, this is not fair.
Así que no es justo si es que el espacio de libertad es bastante amplio, pero la responsabilidad moral ese espacio es pequeño. No es justo.
Or if the moral responsibility is overwhelming, but my space of freedom is very small, that's not fair either.
Tampoco es justo si es que el espacio de la responsabilidad moral es bastante abrumador, pero con mi espacio de libertad más pequeño.
So for an employee, say at the lowest level of the company, the space of freedom is very small, but the CEO has a very large space of freedom.
Entonces, para un empleado de una empresa, su espacio es bastante pequeño, en cambio para el presidente es bastante grande.
And the bigger the space of freedom, the bigger the moral responsibility.
Y mientras más grande sea el espacio de libertad, más grande es la responsabilidad.
Or for instance, for countries, the United States has a lot of space of freedom, is very powerful, and so the moral responsibility of the country of the United States is much bigger than a small country has.
En el caso de Estados Unidos, por ser tan amplio, tiene un amplio espacio de libertad y por ende también un amplio espacio de responsabilidad.
But the final point to explain is, you know, on the top you see decisions are made within the constraints of action, which is that green area. So here we have the freedom. But as individuals or companies, we don't have the freedom, or we cannot change the conditions of actions right now. These are the thick white lines. So that is at a higher level of decision making, say at the meso or the macro level, where those decisions have to be made.
En caso de los empleados, esos espacios de decisión se vuelven bien pequeños porque no podemos cambiar las condiciones de las empresas para las cuales trabajamos.
So, Maria Marta, these are a few explanations, but I mean, you see, this is, for me, it's a very important point.
Thank you. I also use in class the Viktor Frankl's book.
Ah.
Yeah,
it's
It's
overwhelming.
So I think this graphic is, yeah, I think it's very interesting the way you explain it and and how you apply it to the decisions made within the company and the company itself made it within the society.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would like to just to add one point. I ask also, how are those two circles related to each other? You know, freedom and responsibility. And Frankl says, well, if you understand life as a gift, you want to have to respond. If life is just a burden, you cannot find that connection from freedom and responsibility.
Siempre hago esta pregunta también de la relación entre estos dos círculos que son la libertad y la responsabilidad. Y según Frankl, si es que tú concibes la vida como un regalo, entonces no tendrás que contestar la pregunta. Sin embargo, si es que se concibe la vida como una carga, entonces no se podrá entender.
Very good. George, thank you so much. I think we have a question from the public.
Yes.
Emilia, ¿te gustaría decirle a George directamente tu pregunta? Si pueden abrir el sonido para Emilia. Emilia, ¿dónde estás? Bueno, si no está Emilia, le pasamos la pregunta.
Sí, aquí estoy. Muchas
Ahí
gracias.
está, Emilia, ¿sí puedes hablar?
Sí,
Bienvenida.
muchas gracias. I want to thank for all the valuable information you, George, share with us today. And my question is, in an illegal immigrants context, how to guarantee labor rights like social security for them?
Well, you know, when last year, when Joe Biden was elected in the United States president, and actually even before, when our mayor of South Bend, Pete Buttigieg, ran for presidency, I wanted to contact him and to say, when you are president, make sure that the United States is finally signing the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Political Rights. The United States is one of the few countries, with Saudi Arabia and a few islands, who did not sign that International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. They did on civil and political rights. But to do that, and Jimmy Carter at that time wanted to sign or to ratify it, but did not have the political support in the Congress.
Interesante que Estados Unidos, juntamente con Arabia Saudita, es uno de los países quienes no han firmado el convenio de la Declaración de Derechos Humanos. Jimmy Carter intentó hacerlo en su etapa, pero no recibió apoyo.
And to sign, to ratify the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights means that the United States has to make laws in the United States to make sure that immigrants get the same human rights as other people. You know?
Y el no ratificar esos convenios resulta en que los Estados Unidos tienen que implementar a nivel local una serie de leyes para poder garantizar que los inmigrantes puedan tener los mismos derechos.
So, and even illegal immigrants have human rights. You know, of course they have to be checked, etc., but they cannot be just treated as nothing.
Hasta los inmigrantes ilegales también tienen esos mismos derechos y no pueden ser tratados como si fuesen nada.
So, you know, also when the United States want to enforce human rights in China, well, the United States have to ask themselves first, how is the situation in our own country, you know?
Y cuando Estados Unidos quiere hacer cumplir los derechos humanos en la China, deberían primero mirarse a ellos mismos, qué es lo que están haciendo.
So the economic and social rights, including the right to healthcare, is an important issue in the United States today.
Los temas de los derechos económicos y sociales como el derecho a la salud son temas muy importantes en ese país.
Well, I could say many more things, but I think we are running out of time.
We're running out of time. Carmen, você tem uma pergunta última? Não? So, muchísimas gracias a todos, a los coordinadores de la universidad que nos hizo posible este debate que fue muy interesante. Nos quedaríamos aquí horas, ¿verdad? Bueno, y thank you so much, Jordan Enderly. Jimena, muchas gracias por todo. María Marta y Jorge, estupendo, maravilloso lo que ustedes preguntaron y lo que hablaron, ¿no? Melita, muchas gracias por la traducción, y Lisa y todos de la universidad. Bueno, les cuento, los que no son de ALENE todavía, que ALENE existe hace 23 años y es una asociación de académicos y personas de empresas que quieren tener investigación o trabajos o actitudes, ¿no?, en las empresas y en el gobierno de manera ética, socialmente responsable y ahora con mucha preocupación por la sostenibilidad. Está aquí Carmen, que es una fuerte profesional del área y académica del área de sostenibilidad. Entonces, muchísimas gracias por todos que vinieron, y los que no conocen a ALENE y quieren conocerle, por favor, contacten las personas de ALENE que acá están en sus países, que son varios, gracias a Dios, ¿no? O escriben a mí o a Juan o a Jorge o a María Marta de los distintos países, ¿eh? Pues muchísimas, Ecuador, ¿no? Quizá al propio Juan, ¿no? Muchísimas gracias por todo y entramos en contacto en el próximo. Chao.
Muchas gracias.
Adiós.
Thank you very much to all, well, Jimena and Melita and of course Cecilia and all for attending this and for the good question. You see, this what I'm proposing is a framework which involves many questions.
Right.
And to see what does it mean concretely, you know. And so we cannot say with the book it's the job is done. No, it only begins to look at this. But I think it gives us a horizon, a framework, which helps us to sort out important and less important things. Mm-hmm.
I think you're inviting us to read your book, right?
Yeah, sure.
We should all get the book.
And maybe translate it into English, or I'm sorry, into Spanish and Portuguese.
Yes, well, I'm happy to, of course. Actually, friends of mine in Beijing are translating my book into Chinese now.
Well, we don't do that.
Excellent.
Yeah, but I mean, for Spanish and Portuguese would wonderful. I remember, you know, I think, Cecilia, you organized the translation of the Encyclopedia of Business Ethics into Portuguese in the 1990s.
Don't tell that's too long ago.
But it's still not so bad, you know.
No. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very
much.
George,
Yeah,
would you like to have
Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Bye.